Good evening, and you are being recorded. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's webinar, where we'll be providing you tips and best practices as you plan to host your officer transitions. My name is Erin Rivera. I am one of the consultants for Delta Sigma Pi, and I'll be presenting tonight's webinar with Sarah Earle, who is also a consultant for DSP. We would like to discuss how your chapter should approach the end of the term, and in specific, how to transition new officers and what steps to take before getting there, such as how to prepare for transitions, providing best practices on nominations, elections, speeches, voting softwares, and what sections to review in your local documents. And of course, we would like to review what should be covered during the transition meeting in order to have the most effective transition, in order to avoid the sense of unknown maybe some of you felt at one point after being elected. There are a couple things you should be considering prior to having your officer transitions, which include deciding when to conduct both officer nominations and officer elections. The current officers for the executive committee should also create a transition template or follow a template that was created from previous officers. In addition, during the chapter meeting, the chapter can review officer duties, qualifications for positions, and additional items that are located in the chapter's bylaws. The most recently approved copy of both the chapter's bylaws and policies and procedure documents are located on the hub under the dashboard module, which is the blue clipboard. In your chapter bylaws under Article 6, Officer Elections and Officer Duties, you'll be able to view the sections taken from the national policies, as well as the specific bylaws that your chapter decided on, such as the term of office. As for your chapter begins to gear up for elections, we recommend considering these best practices for how to ensure your nominations process starts this transitional process right on the right foot. Remember to review the section on elections from your chapter policies and procedures document, as it has specifics on nominations for officer elections and the actual nominations. You also want to make sure you keep track of all incoming nominations for each position to ensure a seamless election day. You can utilize an Excel sheet, Google Docs, Word document that could be shared with the entire chapter after nominations are held. Nominations from the floor may also be accepted from any member. Per policy, all collegiate members in good standing shall be notified of the date, time, and place for holding the elections of office at least 10 days prior to the date of the election. When thinking about candidate speeches and how to structure them, you may want to decide whether they could be conducted in person or in a virtual setting. You may also consider allowing for the usage of pre-recorded speeches. When deciding what format you want speeches to be held in, consider the time it will take for your speeches to be completed. Question and answer section, as well as time allotted for discussion and the time it takes to conduct the actual vote. Each officer position should have a set time allowed for the speech to maintain consistency. Setting a designated amount of time for each speech can also be helpful for candidates to prepare properly. Some topics that may be helpful in gathering further information from your candidate to make the most informed decision when voting could be the goals the candidate has if they were being elected, as well as ideas they would like to implement. Remember to brainstorm questions prior to listening to speeches so that each candidate is asked the same questions, and consider not asking any questions that may be covered during their speech. Prior to conducting the elections, your chapter must meet its quorum. This can be found in the chapter's bylaws under Article 5. Quorum is usually between 1/3 and 51%. Quorum is the minimum number of brothers in attendance to conduct an actual vote. Per chapter bylaws, in the election of chapter officers, the member receiving a majority of the total votes cast for the office in question shall be declared elected. In the event a tie between two brothers, any additional candidates shall be removed from the ballot, and a revote between the two tied brothers shall be taken. After conducting elections for the nationally recognized position, your chapter may have additional officers under the elected officers. In addition to officer elections, the chapter president may also appoint additional officers or committee chairs, such as webmaster, historian, and/or fundraising chair. There are a lot of different platforms you can utilize for voting. Some tools are WebEx, Google Forms, Zoom polls, Socrative, and direct polls. It is important to note the platform must be anonymous when you're conducting votes. You should not be able to see who voted for each individual. And when sharing the results of the chapter after each vote, simply announce the winner without saying how many chapter votes they have received.
Hey everyone, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Sarah Earl. I'm also one of the educational leadership consultants. So to start off, conducting transition meetings. So once you have your voting software and everything ready to go for the transition meeting and for voting, and you have your new officers, you got to do transitions. So when it comes to conducting the transition meeting itself, you want to make sure that you first find a good amount of time to sit down with the current position holder to accommodate enough time for you and the newly elected person to go throughout, the entire position itself and overview the position and its duties. This conversation should include a review of those officer duties as stated in bylaws and policies, as well as just what the expectation is for that member in the chapter. This can help set a realistic expectation of what will be expected of the new officer and just help reduce any anxiety or any points of confusion on how to correctly do the position. This is also a really great opportunity to consider strategic plans, those things you need to fill out at the end of the year in the hub. This is a great time to do those. It can also, give some insight on those position holders, some good things to be considering for the next term or semester. Um, and again, this gives them an idea of maybe some things that have worked or maybe not have worked in the chapter and give some more insight on maybe what the semester ahead could look like. So again, a great opportunity as a past elected officer to share your experiences with your position. Be open and honest with how things ran, maybe things you wish you would have been able to do. And again, some additional advice and points, for that new member as maybe this is their first position that they're taking on, so it may be a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience. So accommodating to that as best you can. All these things are going to be insightful to newly elected officers as they navigate their newly acquired position. So during this transitional process, it may also be helpful to set goals with them. The saying goes that you don't know what you don't know, and that very much could be the case with new officers. So setting these goals and compiling tips as an outgoing executive committee is only going to help that incoming executive committee with their feedback and what they want to prioritize as a group. Some other things that you may want to consider is having the last executive committee meeting be a joint meeting between the incoming and outgoing officers. Again, this gives everyone an idea of how a meeting should be run, as well as some of the ideas that come up and the different conversations that can occur. So again, now going into some important things that you would want to transition. You want to make sure that when you are transitioning all aspects of your position over to the next person, you want to make sure that you include all those important and oftentimes time sensitive pieces that need to be transitioned to the chapter in order for them to fully operate. Again, a lot of these things are going to correlate to CMP requirements as well as university expectations. So this can include knowing and sharing the location of your chapter's charter, your bank account information and school account information that may need to be transitioned over to new position holders, or any campus specific item that you would need passed down. Things such as maybe a key to a display case, or where you normally have your meetings and how you accommodate those spaces. Do you need to reserve a room? Do you have to let somebody know beforehand? Or maybe anything regarding where the whereabouts are of your chapter's inventory of ritual books, pledge pins, badges, the chapter's gavel, or any memorabilia or keepsakes. Again, these are all things that we want to make sure we transition over so that, again, we all have that information, we have those things, and it doesn't become a discrepancy of we don't know where they are. It's really important to relay these pieces, again, to help coordinate any follow-up actions that you may need to take part on, or maybe some things that we don't know. If you're going through a transition meeting and it ends up being, oh, well, we don't know where our ritual books or maybe we haven't seen the gavel in a few years. Those are some conversations you want to start having now during transitions rather than at the beginning of your term. So now going into some tips, right? During or after submitting your strategic plans, make sure you have a goal setting session. It's one thing to write those things down on paper and make them look really impressive in your strategic plans, but follow through with those plans. Set goals to help obtain, whatever it is that you put in those strategic plans so that you can implement that in your next term. Facilitating those discussions with your district director and advisor are only going to be more helpful in giving you some outside perspective on how this idea may sound. Also, you want to make sure you review past CMP event submissions. You can look at these things by going to the Forms tab in the hub. And if you segue all the way over to Show All Completed Forms, you can actually look at many different past years of submitted forms that help give you some context on, hey, this is an event we did, or maybe, hey, I didn't know that we worked with this organization or that company before. Maybe we can again. So again, it gives a lot of new position holders some information on what has been done or maybe some other things you haven't done and maybe want to try. Again, you want to also try to continue to follow all campus, local, state, and federal laws, ordinances, policies on gathering. I know we've come a long way, within this last academic year, but the pandemic is not over. So whatever your campus or your local state and federal governments are saying, you want to make sure you're following those. Because again, you're not only an organization here, from the national fraternity side of things, but you're also an organization on campus. So you need to make sure you're following all their restrictions as well. Again, another few things here, this is all CMP based, but you want to make sure that you're submitting officer reports. This is something you do need to do on the hub anyway, but again, it's a really good best practice for us as a national office, but also for you as a chapter to know who's doing what, how can we best plan and make sure the right kind of communication is going to the right members of the chapter. Again, this helps us here at central office so that if we need to let you know about something or remind you about something, we're reaching the right people in the chapter and can be most effective to you all. And then lastly, the officer installation ceremony. This is something that you all can partake in when you do get newly elected officers. You can find it in your ritual books, and it's a fairly simple ceremony, but again, something that's a really good best practice to have to commemorate and honor those people that, have taken that next step in their leadership roles and, have really developed themselves throughout the chapter. It's a great way to recognize those individuals. So then we're going to go on to some resources. Again, all of these things that I'm mentioning here, you're going to be able to find on our DSP website, dsp.org. These things include individual officer pages, officer modules, the CMP guide, which I'll go back to, but that's an amazing document. Our individual discipline policy, local, national policies and bylaws, our pledge education guides, fraternity operations guides, and even Delta Sig University. All these things are going to be great components to helping you succeed as a chapter. We definitely know summer break happens, everything kind of becomes mush or maybe not as consistent or known to members. Things get lost in translation sometimes, but these are great resources that can get you right back on track. Just noting one of these on this list, the CMP guide, it's essentially a database of all things regarding our CMP, our chapter management program, how to submit things, what they mean when we're approving and denying things, who's responsible for doing them. So again, when you're having these transitional meetings, when you're starting to plan for what your term's going to look like, you can then, ask yourselves, okay, I have some resources, I can make a best effective plan for the chapter. So again, use your resources, check out our website. So that does conclude our presentation. So I did want to open it up for the people here in the room. If you have any questions for Erin and I about transitions or maybe some best practices you've been thinking of but want to try and maybe want to ask about.
Hi, I actually have a It's kind of like a question, a little bit of concern. My name is Isabel Creel. I'm Chancellor and CHOPS for Delta Omicron. Um, so we have actually a pretty big pledge class this semester, and we're actually also having a lot of members graduate. And our biggest concern is that because my pledge class kind of got thrown into position because the chapter was so small. And now the same thing is kind of happening with our new pledge class. And like our biggest concern is how do we transition them without us actually having a proper transition as well.
Big important question. Thank you for asking it. I'm going to take a second to think of an answer. I think Erin's doing the same, but um Erin, you want to go first? Do you want to try it
Yeah,
out?
I could
Still
definitely go
thinking.
first. I think I understand what you're trying to say. You're saying since you weren't properly transitioned into the role, you'd want to make sure that the next person's properly transitioned. And that is a honest concern. And I think for you in particular in your chapter, you can conduct a formal transition and a correct transition based on the experience you had in your role, right? Each exec officer, even no matter if they were thrown in it or well prepared, has their own experiences in that position. And you want to make sure you convey those experiences to the next individuals so that they are more prepared than as if they were just thrown into it. But also on our previous side, where Sarah was mentioning all like our resources and things like that, those are all wonderful things. We have an officer page, officer module for each nationally recognized role. We have, like for VPPE, videos on how to facilitate the pledge education program. We have a lot of resources that, like, even if you were thrown into that role, you could really get a concept of every aspect of that role. And on our website, if you just kind of search for a little bit, so maybe during one of your exec meetings, I would say like look at all the resources on our website and just find a few to create those transition documents prior to like elections, just so that you could help prepare them as much as possible. So I'm not sure if you want to add any more.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really great point Erin made. Again, use those resources. They're constantly there for you to refer back to, once, twice, three times, however much you all need to feel like you have that support. A couple other things to mention, you have us, right? We worked with chapters day in and day out. Again, if there's something that you all feel like, yeah, I don't know if we should transition this or if this is right, or maybe we have a clarifying question, ask us. We would be happy to answer you, give you that correct information, and set you up for success. We have an open door policy as consultants to work with chapters always. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. And then lastly, a good practice is a good practice once it's started. So what I mean by that is just starting to have transitional documents alone is going to give you all a significant advantage than you had before. Maybe the experience you had, keeping track of what worked for you all, looking back at this academic year, maybe some things like, oh wow, I wish we checked the CMP more, maybe we wouldn't have missed those requirements, or maybe reaching out to these people or trying this didn't work or it did work. Taking note of that stuff is only going to help the next people. And if you build up that system year after year, you're going to be a lot better spot than not doing it at all. But yeah, that would be my answer to that. That's a really good question, though.
Thank you, Erin and Sarah. That really was very helpful.
Awesome. Any other questions, Isabel or Don in the room? Do you have any questions?
I don't, Sarah. I just appreciate you and Erin's time. I am the district director for the Alpha Beta chapter, and uh, I've noticed that in past years they haven't had as good of a transition as they should have, and so this year I'm going to jump in and participate during the transition meeting to try and make sure that everything's covered. So I was looking for, if this was by design a pretty basic discussion here tonight, and I was just kind of looking for any new ideas, anything unique that we might be able to augment a regular transition meeting from. So I really don't have any questions at this point, but I appreciate you guys doing this presentation.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for attending. Wonderful. One last call. Any questions or things we can clear up, answer, anything like that for anybody? Not seeing any. So with that, I know I speak on behalf of Erin as well when we say thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to attend tonight's webinar. Feel free to reach out to us if you need absolutely anything. You can reach us best at 2 different emails, hub@dsp.org, as well as consultants@dsp.org. We'd be happy to help you in the future should anything come up, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, guys.